Hello, I'm Dr. Ron Maurer, and I'm running for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Well, evaluation of teachers and principals and superintendents today in Oregon really does not occur. And so we do need to have a way of evaluating teachers, their supervisors, and their supervisor's supervisor. And that is one way that we can change Oregon education. I think when you talk about pay for performance, you are treading into political waters that have been poisoned. And so what we need to do is really talk about how do we improve outcomes. And one way to improve outcomes is through an evaluation process. And right now, Oregon does not connect a teacher's identifier with the student assessment scores. And in our recent Race to the Top application, that was one of the key criteria that a state must do this. Oregon has been reluctant to do it, and the incumbent wants to take 1.5 to 2 years to even make that step. And I say that's a relatively simple thing to do, and it could be accomplished in very short order. But then you have to look at the data and find out exactly what does it tell you. Is there a correlation between student performance and teachers? And intuitively, I think you would say yes, there is. But there's also a lot of outside forces, and there are a lot of other mitigating circumstances that you also have to account for. If you just say testing and teacher performance are the only factors you can evaluate, I think you're misguided, because in fact we know that culture and the family situation does not always help students help the classroom and help them perform well. And so I certainly don't want to hold a teacher accountable for something that is completely out of their control. Well, I think that the reality is that we're actually going to see both, and we're going to continue to see both. That in fact virtual school is probably something that we need to even use more in both public school, private school, and everything in between. And I don't look at it, I'm looking at it more not as the public versus private question, but as the delivery question. And that we are facing a significant financial crisis in schools that we are going to have to reckon with the PERS tsunami, as well as the loss of federal stimulus funds. So we're going to have to find creative and new ways of delivering instructional material. And if you don't have teachers in the classroom, I think that class sizes of 40 and 50 are going to be just untenable. And so you're going to have to find new ways to deliver material, and I think we need to actually use the technology more. And so this does create an opportunity for substantial expansion so that we can provide kids at all levels with appropriate education. Well, I do think that our funding formula is overly complex, that the funding formula in fact creates a perverse incentive, for example, to label kids as English language learners and to keep them in that category. And I think that it creates a disincentive to move them out of those programs. And I grew up as a kid in the old funding style, because my parents were public school teachers, of the annual levy, and that every year we struggled to pass a levy in a district that was actually very supportive of schools. And so when it moved to the state, it really took that away. Over time, I think in fact I think we seriously need to consider moving it back down to the local level. As much as that we moved it up to the state to create equity, the reality is that funding is not equal among districts. That we have some districts that are over $10,000 and $12,000, and some districts that are around $7,500 or $7,600, and those are the mainstream. I'm not talking about the outliers where there's $70,000 per student in a very small school district. So I do think that is going to be a perennial issue, and that it needs some serious study. Well, currently they are not, and I think that the charter school, depending on the situation, may or may not want certified teachers. But again, when it comes down to when we are facing some just absolute critical times and a real reformation of K-12 education, I think we need to say who's requiring us to have certified teachers in a charter school. That does certification in fact translate to better outcomes? And just because you're a certified teacher, I think it's clearly proven that doesn't automatically mean that you're going to be successful. That really is a combination of teaching, of experience, as well as that training that you received before, but also life experience too. And that there is, as you teach, you're going to become better. And that, in fact, you do need to have some training in the field of education and child development. Those are very helpful. But does our certification process actually translate into successful schools? And I think the jury is still out. Well, I just would encourage people to look at our current state of schools. Oregon ranks 43rd in overall quality outcomes, and I don't find anybody, Republican, Democrat, Independent, that says that's an acceptable state. We are not moving in a direction that is going to improve that. In fact, it appears that the system is, if it is improving at all, it's kicking and screaming all the way. And that we need to bring a balance of power back into state government, back into the education system that actually holds the kids' interest, at least, if not absolutely, imperative at the height of our importance to the system itself. Because if you have a structure that only looks out for, quote, the system and not the student, then we are failing our future. And so I would encourage everybody to visit my website, runforschools.com, and vote for Ron Maurer.